Capture of Jericho. The capture of Jericho occurred between 19 and 21 February 1918 to the east of Jerusalem, beginning the occupation of the Jordan Valley during the Sinai and Palestine Campaign of the First World War. Fighting took place in an area bordered by the Bethlehem Nablus Road in the west, the Jordan River in the east, and north of a line from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea. Here a British Empire force attacked Ottoman positions, forcing them back to Jericho and eventually across the Jordan River. Winter rains put an end to campaigning after the advance from the Gaza Beersheba line to the capture of Jerusalem in December 1917. This lull in the fighting offered the opportunity for the captured territories to be consolidated. Extensive developments were also required along the lines of communication to ensure that front-line troops were adequately supplied, approximately 150 miles 240 km from their main bases at Moascar and Kantara on the Suez Canal. General Edmund Allenby's initial strategic plans focused on his open right flank. If attacked with sufficiently large forces, he could be outflanked by an attack from the east, unlike his left flank, which rested securely on the Mediterranean Sea to the west. His aim was to capture the territory east of Jerusalem stretching to the Dead Sea, where his right flank could be more secure. The area was garrisoned by Ottoman troops entrenched on hilltops, which the British infantry, Australian light horse, and New Zealand mounted rifles brigades attacked. The infantry captured Talat ed-Dum on the main Jerusalem to Jericho road, while the light horse and mounted rifle brigades captured Jericho and the area to the south bordered by the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. Background: the advance from Beersheba came to a halt in December. On 14 December, Allenby reported to the War Cabinet that the rainy season would prevent any further operations after Jerusalem was secured for at least 2 months. At this time, the Egyptian Expeditionary Force was paralyzed by a breakdown in logistics, forcing Allenby to send the Anzac and the Australian Mounted Divisions, along with the Imperial Camel Corps Brigade south of Gaza, to shorten their lines of communication. He wrote, "I can't feed them with certainty, and even now, a fortnight's heavy rain would bring me near starvation." On 1 January, the 5th Mounted Brigade began moving back through the rain and slush, followed by the 4th Light Horse Brigade's field ambulance, beginning the Australian Mounted Division's journey back to Deir el-Balah south of Gaza. The Anzac Mounted Division did not move back quite so far. The 1st and possibly 2nd Light Horse Brigades moved back to Asdod, while the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade bivouacked near Ain Kara, also known as Rishon LeZion, not far from Jaffa. Allenby wrote on 25 January, "I want to extend my right to include Jericho and the north of the Dead Sea." This advance would remove the more serious threat to his right by pushing all the enemy across the Jordan River and securing the Jordan River crossings. It would also prevent raids into the country to the west of the Dead Sea and provide a narrow starting point for operations against the Hedges Railway. General Jean-Christian Smuts, a member of the Imperial War Cabinet, was sent to confer with Allenby regarding the implementation of a French qualification to the War Office's Joint Note No. Smuts was on his way back to London in February when the first step was taken to accomplish his suggestion of crossing the Jordan River and capturing the Hedges Railway, and the front line was extended eastwards with the successful capture of Jericho. Prelude: the country on the eastern side of the Judean hills falls into the Jordan Valley in a confused mass of rocky ridges and deep narrow valleys. All the main wadis run from west to east, often with steep high banks, while the tributaries joined from all directions, breaking up the ridges, making the hills almost impossible to cross. Most tracks ran along the narrow beds of ravines where progress had to be made in single file. Further north at Jebel Qurantal, also known as Jebel Qurantal, the Mount of Temptation, and Mount Quarantania, the mountains end abruptly in a 1,000-foot 300-m cliff. Sometimes the attacking parties had to haul themselves and each other over abrupt cliffs to be in a position to fight at close quarters at the top. Yet, in early spring, the area was covered by wild flowers, including cyclamen, anemones, poppies, and tulips. Defending force. 3 Ottoman armies were deployed to defend their front line. The 8th Army, headquartered at Tulkarem, defended the Mediterranean section. The 7th Army, headquartered at Nablus, defended the Judean Hills sector. And the 4th Army, headquartered at Amman, defended the eastern Transjordan section of the line. Between 3,000 and 5,000 Ottoman troops from the 26th and 53rd Infantry Divisions Roman 20 Corps defended the area on the western edge of the Jordan Valley. They garrisoned a series of hilltops from Tub el-Kantara, near the Dead Sea, through Talat ed-Dum to the Wadi Farah. Here the Roman 20 Corps was entrenched at Razam Daces and El Munter, Iraq, Ibrahim astride the Jericho road. There was also at least one regiment in the Jordan Valley near the Wadi el-Auja. Mounted and infantry attacking force. By February, logistics had sufficiently developed to support the advance towards Jericho, and Allenby ordered Lieutenant General Philip Chetwode to capture Jericho as soon as the weather cleared. While the remainder of the Egyptian expeditionary force held the front line and garrisoned the captured territories in southern Palestine, Chetwode's Roman 20 Corps, the 60th 2/2nd London Division, was to make the attack towards Jericho, supported by his 53rd Welsh Division and one infantry brigade from the 74th Yeomanry Division on the left. They were to move towards the Wadi el-Auja, which flowed eastwards into the Jordan River, not to be confused with the Wadi el-Auja, which flowed westwards into the Mediterranean Sea from the same watershed. At the same time, Chauvel's Desert Mounted Corps, mounted force formed by the 1st Light Horse Brigade and the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade, both brigades from the Anzac Mounted Division, was to cover the right flank of Chetwode's infantry and advance towards Rujum el Bar on the Dead Sea. The plan was for the 60th London Division to advance to Muqmas 8 miles 13 km northeast of Jerusalem, then advance forward 6 miles 9.7 km east through El Munter, Iraq, Ibrahim, and Ras at Tawil. Their left flank was to be covered the 53rd Welsh Division, which was to capture the high ground at Ramon 3 miles 4.8 km north of Muqmas, while their right was covered by the Anzac Mounted Division. The second stage required the 60th London Division to advance to a point yet to be decided in 3 brigade columns, the right to Jebel Ektaf south of the main Jericho road, the center to Talat ed-Dum, and the left column moving along the ancient road running east from Muqmas. Their final advance would take them to the edge of the ridge overlooking Jericho and the Jordan Valley. There was no plan for them to enter the valley. Each infantry column was to be supported by a 60-pounder or 6-inch artillery battery, a field artillery brigade, and a field company of Royal Engineers. On 14 February, preliminary operations were carried out by the Roman 20 Corps, the 60th London Division, which advanced to Muqmas 8 miles 13 km north. At this time, the 1st Light Horse and New Zealand Mounted Rifles brigades were at Ankara. They marched out for Bethlehem, arriving there on 17 and 18 February. While the infantry attacks were progressing along the road between Jerusalem and Jericho on 19 February, the 2 brigades of the Anzac Mounted Division were to move in a flanking movement towards Nebi Musa. They were to make their way down into the Jordan Valley towards Rujum el Bar to cut off enemy retreat from Jericho and drive the remaining Ottoman defenders to the eastern side of the Jordan River. Air support. On 3 January, 2 Australian aircraft discovered boats carrying corn and hay moving from Gor el Hadid behind Point Costigan and Rujum el Bar at the northern end of the Dead Sea. These were bombed and sprayed with bullets repeatedly until the boat service stopped. On 10 January, as part of the preparations for the attack on Jericho, 6 aircraft dropped 48 bombs on Amman and Qasir, a Hejaz railway station 6 miles 9.7 km to the south, resulting in several direct hits on rolling stock. Aircraft patrols were then directed to fly over Jericho and Shunit Nimrin on the western and eastern sectors of the Jordan Valley on alternate days. These patrols closely watched and reported tactical details, including the number of tents and camps, the the state of supply dumps, the conditions of roads and tracks and traffic on the railway. Battle. Infantry attack on 19 February. The 60th London Division advanced with their 180th Brigade in the centre, their 181st Brigade on the left, and their 179th Brigade, with the Wellington Mounted Rifle Regiment covering their right flank. At Ras at Towel, the 2/23rd Battalion, London Regiment 181st Brigade suffered 50 casualties in attacking some 300 entrenched Ottomans, capturing 25 prisoners and 2 machine guns. The Ottomans abandoned their positions soon after. To the northeast of El Munter, Iraq Ibrahim, during a further advance by the 2/20th Battalion, London Regiment along a narrow ridge on the south bank of the Wadi Farah, they captured the high ground, suffering 66 casualties. Meanwhile, on the left flank of the 60th London Division, the 160th Brigade of the 53rd Welsh Division captured Ramon, where the 2/10th Battalion, Middlesex Regiment, had some hard fighting, and the heights to the south. The Wellington Mounted Rifles Regiment moved from Bethlehem to the Greek monastery of Marsaba and onto the El Bukeya Plateau, where Ottoman forces were entrenched astride the Marsaba to Jericho road south of Nebi Musa. The remainder of the 1st Light Horse and New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigades moved from Bethlehem towards El Munter. Chetwode and Chauvel watched these operations begin from the Mount of Olives, more than 2,000 feet 610 m above sea level. By the time the Light Horse and Mounted Rifles Brigades reached Jericho on 21 February, they were nearly 1,200 feet 370 m below sea level. 20 February. Infantry attack. The 3 infantry columns advanced. The column in the center, the 180th Brigade, captured their objective of Talat ed-Dum on the main road from Jerusalem to Jericho. This infantry brigade moved along the Jerusalem to Jericho road towards Talat ed-Dum. They were supported by the 10th Heavy Battery and 1 6-inch howitzer of the 383rd Siege Battery. The village was captured after an hour's bombardment. On the left, the 181st Brigade was slowed in their advance by small rearguards which showed skills in maneuver. The brigade was only able to advance 2.5 miles 4.0 km to be about halfway between Ras at Towel and Jebel Qurantal, also known as Jebel Qurantal, the Mount of Temptation, and Mount Quarantania by nightfall, with the 231st Brigade of the 74th Yeomanry Division forming a reserve. On the right, the 179th Brigade column marched towards Jebel Ektaf to the south of Talat ed-Dum. Their 2/13th Battalion, London Regiment, however, faced a sheer drop of over 20 feet 6.1 m and had to proceed across intervening ridges into parallel wadis, arriving too late for the attack. Meanwhile, 2 companies of the 2/16th Battalion, London Regiment from the 179th Brigade of the 60th London Division were ordered to support an attack on Jebel Ektaf by the 2/15th Battalion, London Regiment. By 8:15 they had captured the advanced trenches, 3 companies, and fought their way up into the firing line on the summit of the hill. At 10:00 the British infantry were reported to have captured this dominating position on the Jerusalem-Jericho road, but a strong counter-attack drove them off. Jebel Ektaf was finally captured at about 12:30, when heavy artillery helped the desperate attackers secure their objective. Mounted attack. Meanwhile, the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade, with the Wellington Mounted Rifles Regiment, which had returned from the 179th Brigade, led the 1st Light Horse Brigade at 3:30 in their advance on El Munter. The advance guard, formed by the Wellington Mounted Rifles Regiment, moved from Bethlehem along an ancient road down the Wadi and Nar to the valley near El Munter Hill, followed by their brigade and the 1st Light Horse Brigade. They zigzagged 3 miles 4.8 km down to the valley floor, while Ottoman soldiers on the height of El Munter 1250 feet 380 m above watched their approach. Because of the terrain they moved in single file. The New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade was strung out from 5 to 8 miles 8.013 km, and it was hours before the long column could deploy for the attack. By 6:00, all the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade was in the valley. The Wellington Mounted Rifles Regiment was attacking Hill 306, while the Canterbury and Auckland Mounted Rifles Regiments attacked Hill 288. Shortly after 12:00, a mounted advance by an Auckland squadron took Hill 288, and Hill 306 was captured soon after. They attacked Ottoman positions from Tip el Quneitra to Jebel el Kamam astride the Marsaba-Jericho road. These were both occupied soon after 14:00, forcing the Ottoman defenders to fall back to Nebi Musa. But Nebi Musa was strongly held by entrenched Ottoman soldiers supported by artillery, which made it impossible to move on. The attack was postponed until the next day. Even in daylight I should not have dreamt of riding this track down the Wadi Qumran to the valley of the Jordan, and yet the whole brigade passed along it without mishap. At 11:00 p.m. we were at the arranged position, and after tethering out the horses rolled ourselves up in our blankets. The night was bitterly cold, and we missed our bivvies, orders having been given to travel light, so that every man rode with an absolute minimum weight. We are to leave here at 3:30 am to attack Nebi Musa. Meanwhile, at dusk, the first Light Horse Brigade began its descent. They moved down the Wadi Qumran to the Jordan Valley, following a goat track which fell 1,300 feet 400 m in 2 miles 3.2 km to get into position to attack Nebi Musa from the rear. This journey was successfully completed by midnight. 21 February. Under cover of darkness, the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade advanced north along a very rough track and by daylight had reached just east of the Nebi Musa position. They made a dismounted attack while British infantry attacked Nebi Musa from the rear. The Canterbury Mounted Rifles Regiment occupied Nebi Musa at daylight, after crossing the gorge on foot to find the Ottoman garrison had withdrawn with their guns. When the 1st Light Horse Brigade reached the floor of the Jordan Valley, near the Dead Sea 1,300 feet 400 and below sea level, it turned north towards Jericho. A single troop of 3rd Light Horse Regiment entered Jericho at about 8:00 to find the Ottoman garrison had withdrawn. The remainder of the brigade advanced up the Jordan Valley as far as the Wadi el Auja, while the Wellington Mounted Rifles Regiment New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade occupied Rujum el Bar on the north shore of the Dead Sea. Meanwhile, the 60th London Division moved to the top of the cliff overlooking Jericho and the Jordan Valley from Nebi Musa to Jebel Qurantal. Divisional headquarters staff set up their report center about 1 mile 1.6 km behind Jericho. When they were sitting down to a morning cup of tea, Chetwode and Chauvel joined them. Chater was sitting on the step of his car when shells fired from the other side of the Jordan River started to explode. One hit the front of his car and he narrowly escaped injury. This gun continued shelling the area at a range of over 10,000 yards 9,100 m. The British 13-pounders could get no further than 6,000 yards 5,500 m. Chetwode's force of infantry and mounted units suffered 510 casualties during these operations. Air support. During these 3 days of operations, No. 1 Squadron's aircraft completely dominated all enemy aircraft, bombing and machine gunning Ottoman positions, and reporting to headquarters on progress and estimates of Ottoman dispositions and strength. Messages were also dropped on troops in the front line with urgent news. Considerable Ottoman reinforcements were seen to arrive at Shunit Nimrin on the eastern side of the Jordan River, and an aerial raiding formation from No. 1 Squadron bombed troop tents, marquees, and a supply dump in the area. Aftermath. On 22 February, the 60th London Division withdrew its main line to Jebel Ektaf Talat ed Dumraz at Tawil, leaving outposts on the cliffs above the Jordan Valley, and the Anzac Mounted Division started their journey back to Rachan Zion via Bethlehem. The Anzac Mounted Division left behind in the Jordan Valley the Auckland Mounted Rifles Regiment with a subsection of machine guns and an artillery battery under orders of the 60th Division in a strong position where the road for Ottoman troops on the western bank of the Jordan River were holding a strong bridgehead at Gornieh, protecting the old stone bridge on the main Jerusalem to East Salt Road. There was also a smaller detachment downstream, covering the fort at Makkedet Hajla, the traditional site of Christ's baptism. The Auckland Mounted Rifle Regiment patrolled the Jordan River and Valley area under enemy observation, attracting artillery shelling from Ottoman field guns. The patrols monitored the Ottoman positions at Gornieh and Makkedet Hajla until 25 February, when all Ottoman troops, guns and a pontoon bridge were found to have been removed to the east bank of the river. At the same time, Shunit Nimrin was rapidly entrenched by the Ottoman Seventh Army and was soon held in force. Ottoman army garrisons continued to hold the Hejaz Railway from Daraa to Medina, although the line was harassed and cut by insurgent Arab units, and Semmel's Roman 8 and Roman 12 Corps guarded the northern Levantine. The Ottoman Empire's war minister, Enver Pasha, had lost confidence in the commander of the Ottoman forces in Palestine, German General von Falkenhayn, and on 1 March 1918 replaced him with General Otto Liman von Sanders. On 6 March the War Cabinet gave Allenby leave to advance to the maximum extent possible, consistent with the safety of the force under his orders. He decided to create a third infantry corps called the Roman 22, commanded by Barrow, with Wavell as his chief of staff. On 21 March an attempt to cut the Hejaz Railway at Amman began. This coincided with the launch of the German spring offensive by Ludendorff against the Allies on the Western Front.